The war on drugs in this country is being fought at the federal, state, and local level as law enforcement officials try to crack down on drug smuggling and drug sales. But what you might find surprising is what's happening in some of the wealthiest circles in this country. Private donors are spending millions of dollars to promote the decriminalization and legalization of marijuana. Bill Tucker reports.
It's just a plant, that's all. Not a dangerous drug. It's a children's book where farmers grow it and parents, doctors, mayors, even presidents use marijuana. It's aimed at 6 to 12-year-olds. The publisher says the book is not intended to promote marijuana use, but to create dialogue between kids and their parents about the plant.
It's just a plant. That completely normalizes and completely neutralizes any message that there might be anything hazardous associated with using it.
The self-published book was funded partially with money provided by the Marijuana Policy Project. Decriminalization, or outright legalization of marijuana, has some colorful and very high-profile people on its list of supporters. John Sperling, head of the largest online university in the world, the University of Phoenix. Financier George Soros, who provides roughly 1/3 of the funding for the Drug Policy Alliance's $7 million a year budget. He supports decriminalization and medical marijuana. Peter Lewis, chairman of Progressive Auto Insurance, who supplies about 1/2 of the funding for the Marijuana Policy Project's $8 million a year annual budget, supports legalization and regulation along the lines of tobacco and alcohol. Opponents of drug legalization are quick to point out the deep pockets of the pro-pot side of the argument, which is equally quick to respond.
I have to laugh when people think that we're a well-funded legalization machine. My response to that is, hey, I would take the government's budget over our budget any day.
All total, Campy estimates that about $25 million is spent advocating on behalf of marijuana every year. As of today, marijuana is legal for medical use in 11 states. And Christine, another dozen states are expected to soon be considering legislation that would make it legal in their states as well.
Okay, so where does I've heard it called the anti-prohibition movement, or the pro-pot lobby, or where does this lobby fit, I guess, on the political spectrum?
Well, on the political spectrum, it probably would surprise a lot of people. These groups do give money to candidates. They go to Democratic, by and large, get the majority of them. But there are a number of Republicans on that list as well. And tomorrow night, we're going to take a look at the list of who is getting money from these groups and supporting them in their drive to push these legislation through.
And the folks who are really pushing to sort of end drug use among our youth, do they say that by having this pro-pot lobby out there that it's somehow hampering what they're trying to do?
Well, yes, and they're very disturbed because, as you would expect, they're the Nancy Reagan crowd in essence. Right. They're the Just Say No group. And when you say to them, but we spend $100 billion at the federal and state level right now fighting the war on drugs. Right. Their response is that's not enough money. We need to be spending more money, and we need to be educating people about the dangers of these drugs, and we should not be moving in the direction that a lot of the country is, in fact, moving in, which seems to be a friendlier stance toward marijuana.
All right, Bill Tucker, thanks so much. We'll look forward to that tomorrow. Thanks, Bill. That brings us to the subject of tonight's poll. Do you believe marijuana should be legalized in this country? Yes or no? Cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the broadcast. Tonight, there's clear evidence of how our broken border with Mexico is an integral part of the country's drug problem. A Mexican man was arrested at the Nogales port of entry into this country after authorities found more than 2,700 pounds of marijuana hidden among produce pallets on his truck. The driver was a member of the Free and Secure Trade Program, which makes it easier for so-called low-risk participants to transport goods and services across the border quickly. The driver's credentials for that program have now been revoked. Coming up. And now the results of tonight's poll. 3/4 of you say marijuana should be legalized in this country. 27% say no. Time now for more of your thoughts. Leslie in Maryland, we are so anxious to try and fix the rest of the world's problems while our own country is in shambles and our government a sham. Isn't it time for us to put our own house in order before we attempt to fix the world? Marianne in Tennessee, please don't see this as an endorsement of drug use. It is intended as a realistic look at the failures of prohibition and recognition of Americans' appetite for mind-altering drugs. It is clear that as long as there is such demand for drugs, legal or illegal, there will be supply. The question is, do we continue doing what we know has not worked, or will we take a different path? Devin, in Missouri, the greater part of the war on drugs would be over if our lawmakers would adopt a sane approach to the decriminalization and regulation of marijuana. It's time to stop letting the pharmaceutical, tobacco, and alcohol lobbies set drug policies in the U.S. Ron, in Ontario, I think we should be more outraged that roughly 20% of parents have no control over their children's activities. Everyone blames the tobacco companies for teenagers smoking, the alcohol manufacturers for teenagers drinking, the drug pushers for drug abuse. It's about time someone starts blaming adults for bad parenting. Jonathan, in British Columbia, if those under the age of 21 are classified as children when examining sales of alcohol, I must admit to some confusion. How can the larger society accept these children as being old enough to fight and die in their country's military, yet not old enough to legally purchase a beer? We love hearing from you. Send us your thoughts at loudobbs.com. Thanks for being with us tonight. Please join us tomorrow. Among our guests,